Hello and welcome dear learners to the NPTEL course on Nutritional Epidemiology, a way towards a healthy life. In the Module 1, Foundations and Principles of Nutritional Epidemiology, and the Chapter 2, we'll be discussing about the measurement of diet and nutritional exposure. In this chapter, we'll be talking about the concept of dietary exposure in epidemiological research, the dietary assessment methods, the strength and limitations of dietary assessment tools. Also, we will be discussing about the measurement errors and bias in dietary data. As we have discussed in the previous chapter, in continuation to that, we will be talking more about the validation and standardization of dietary assessment methods, the use of biomarkers in nutritional assessment. So, with respect to the concept of dietary exposure in epidemiological research, the dietary exposure refers to the type, the quantity, frequency, and patterns of food, beverages, and nutrient consumed by individuals or populations, and to how these factors influence the health outcome. It is very important that this all forms the basis of nutritional epidemiology. This enables the researchers to examine the association between diet and disease. It identifies the risk or protective dietary factors and informs the public health recommendation, which makes a very important reason to study nutritional epidemiology. So, in continuation with the concept of dietary exposure in epidemiological research, we can see the levels of dietary exposure. For the nutrition level, we find the intake of specific chemical components, that is a macronutrient and micronutrient. For example, the grams of saturated fats we can consider as a macro one, while a milligram of vitamin C can be seen for consideration in micronutrient. So when we talk about the second level, that is food level, that is a consumption of specific food items or groups, serving of a red meat per week or a cup of leafy greens per day. The third level is the dietary pattern level, that is the highest level synergy of multiple foods. Adherence to the score for Mediterranean diet, that is a DASH diet adherence, and the non-nutrient level, that is the exposure of additives, pesticides, bioactive compounds, which is being seen as the food additives and pesticides, the bioactive compounds, that is flavonoids, affecting the biological processes. So we have identified the different levels of dietary exposure, considering from the nutrition level to the food level to the dietary pattern level and non-nutrient level. In continuation with that, we will identify the dimensions of exposure. Amount or the quantity will determine how and in what way you are consuming it, whether it is a 50 gram or 100 gram. How much is consumed matters a lot. With respect to the frequency, that is daily, weekly, once in a month, how often the exposure occurs. Is it daily that you are consuming it? Is it in a week that you are consuming it? Is it in a month that you are consuming it? The other dimension is the duration. If it is for 2 years to 20 years or 10 years to 15 years. So the high fiber diet for 20 years, how long the habit has persisted. For example, a high fiber diet for 2 years versus to 20 years can make a great impact in the disease condition or in the health condition of a person. What are the challenges in defining the exposure? The concept of dietary exposure in epidemiological research makes a more reason for defining the exposure to be seen with respect to collinearity or the measurement error or latency. If you do go with the collinearity part, the food are often eaten together. Most of the time you find in your home or in your lunch or your dinner, we find that people who eat high fiber cereals often also drink more milk, making it hard to isolate which specific exposure caused a health effect. So this makes a definitive challenge to understand the collinearity, what versus to what defines the challenge. In with respect to measurement, when noise in data, the misreporting can lead to noise in the data, potentially hiding a true relationship between a diet and a disease. Where it is very important that whenever you do a survey or the research or a survey are conducted, it needs to be accurate in relation to the diet and the disease condition. Now, for the latency part, actually, when we talk about 20 years ago, a person's condition and eating habit versus to the present condition, whether it can be a heart disease or a diabetes. The relevant exposure for a disease like heart disease might have occurred 20 years ago and not the last week, where the latency is more connected with this part to be very importantly emphasized. Now, the dietary assessment methods. The researchers use several primary tools to capture dietary data, each with respect to the different focuses. One among the first and very important method is the 24-hour recall. That is, the type is subjective and a short-term method. A structured interview, often by a trained professional, is being taken, which captures all food and drinks that is consumed in the past 24 hours. And it is done for assessing the average intake in a large group or validating the other tools. So this can be seen as a very important dietary assessment method. The very second and very important dietary assessment method is food frequency questionnaire, that is called as FFQ. This is also a very subjective and a long-term assessment. What is being done over here? A predefined list of food asking how often each was consumed over a month or a year. What does it really results to? It gives a large-scale epidemiological studies looking at a chronic disease risk over a period of time. This can be for heart disease or diabetes or any progressive chronic disease condition. The third and very important method is a diet history method. This is also very subjective and takes in account for long term. It is being conducted as an in-depth interview capturing habitual meal patterns and detailed food types. To be seen as benefiting in clinical settings or small-scale research where a highly detailed usual diet is needed and which has been identified as one among the very important dietary assessment method. The fourth and very next in aligned to this is the food records or weight food intake, that is a subjective and a short term like the very first one, which take in accounts the food records, that is the diet diaries, which ask the patterns to record all foods and beverages as they are consumed over several days. That may be usually from 3 days to 7 days and all, including a description and estimated or weight per portions. You can say it gives you a detailed data with no memory reliance, often used as reference standard and can be seen as important for short studies. Biomarkers are one as being seen as a recent advantages and has been a very important objective type of a study. Biological samples, that is blood, urine and other, used to measure specific nutrient levels, for example urinary sodium. What is it best used for? It is used for verifying the accuracy of self-reported data and avoiding memory bias, which is more in the previous cases that is subjective, where versus here it is more related to the objective part of the outcome. So this gives us a very importance actually how to take dietary assessment method, very important to capture the dietary data and to make decisions on the basis of the outcomes. Are there any strengths and limitations of the dietary assessment tools that we have discussed? Yes, it is. On the strength part, if we do count, it enables the investigations of diet disease relationship, which makes a very important reason to conduct the dietary assessment tools. The dietary assessment tools capture the patterns, frequency, and portions. They're useful for population level monitoring, and these are possible for making the use of biomarkers for validation. So on the other side, for the strength, we can see the limitations. The limitation recalls for the bias and misreporting, which makes the complex food are more difficult to record versus to the simple one. Cultural differences affect the accuracy part and make it more difficult for the dietary assessment tools to conduct. Most of the time we have been seeing that the nutrient databases vary across country, and there is a great difference in calculating the dietary assessment tools from one country to other. So with number of limitations on the strength and the strength to be calculated, we need to see in what validity we have to take ahead the dietary different assessment tools. For talking about the measurement errors and the bias in the dietary data, which has been seen and an issue of discussion always, which makes us a very prime reason of measurement errors to be taken seriously. Measurement errors includes random error, which can be seen to the day-to-day intake variability, and random misreporting, which can occur by a person who is reporting it. On the other side, the systematic errors, which are the consistent under or over reporting intake related to bias, which can be seen in government survey or long scale surveys, that distort the estimates of the true usual intake, where you talk about the recall biases, where the participants may have forgot the items, especially the snacks or the other portions, which makes them more reasons actually to give something as in wrong information. On the other side, where the intra-individual variation as a person's diet day to day versus a single unhealthy ones, which gives a reason actually for a person to come across for an intra-individual variation, which is very important for a part. Social disability bias, where people often over-report healthy foods and record is often underreported, which makes sometimes very difficult to understand from the point of social preferences. Portion size estimation, the struggle to accurately estimate the weight or the volume of the food consumed is something which is making a difficulty on a part how to take it ahead. Database limitation. The nutrient analysis databases may not account for processing brand and soil variations, which gives a limitation for the data to be considered as for an important decision making. Instrument bias, errors or inaccuracies inherent in measurement tools or equipment, which can lead to faulty. And this all makes that the measurement errors, including the random and systemic errors, are one to take not or to take it yes for the decisions which are being termed out of the assessment which are being done on a regular basis versus to an individual persons for dealing with the different issues that comes with the dietary pattern. Now, with the validation and standardization of dietary assessment method. The validation is the process of assessing how well a dietary assessment tool like FFQ measures what is intended to measure. If we do talk about the different types of validation in nutritional epidemiology, a relative validation, objective validation, and biomarker comparison are being seen as very important. But to compare a new dietary assessment against an existing one, which is more being seen in relative validation, which makes one a person actually to see as a call to take it as a very standard validation. Where versus the objective validation, which comes from one person actually, which we have been seen in the different assessment of dietary. The last one, which was objective, identifies to the one which has been seen over here in the green, where the comparison comes from self-reported intakes to a measured food intakes or an external databases, where a gold standard method has been seen established. The biomarkers comparison, which is being a newer advent, where a compare dietary assessment to the biomarkers, for example, the blood or urine analysis. So validation is the process which makes more easier to assess the dietary assessment tools of the accuracy and the selection part. The validation and standardization of dietary assessment method has a level of objectives. If we do talk about the different objectives to make it more clear that why do we require validation, it makes us the measurement of the true between the subject variation in the dietary factors of interest, where it is to determine whether and which to take being as a diet. A qualitative documentation which gives us a rich information that the epidemiological assessment method can detect the differences in the diet that exist among the subject groups. Also, that standardization of dietary, that is a questionnaire against a true measure of absolute intake, which enhances the capacity to compare the findings with other studies, which is very important to understand that validation makes it more clarity for the other studies in comparison to a present conducted studies. Quantitative measurement of exposure miscalcification so that the measures of association such as relative risk can be corrected from the measurement error. So it is very important for the policy formulations that how and what basis the qualitative measurement gives you the classification. Now, for ensuring the consistency, we need to see the standardization which involves the uniform procedures to minimize the noise, that is a random error, and interior bias, that is a systemic error. If we do talk about the area of control, that is the interview process, portion estimation, data entry and nutrient analysis, we do understand that the standardized tools for protocols for interview process gives us the multiple pass method, that is a 5-step to prompt map. For the portions estimation, we get a food atlas, that is a 3D models and standard household models. For data entry, that is ASA24 or EpicSoft, that is a standardized software which has been used to understand the data entry. Nutrition analysis of food composition databases. So what is the impact on data quality? It minimizes the forgotten food and ensures the thoroughness in the interview process, where versus it reduces the high error rate associated with guessing weights or volumes in the portion estimation. In the data entry, the impact on data quality removes the risk of different researchers interpreting the food items differently, where the impact on data quality in nutrition analysis comes ensuring that every apple or egg is assigned identical nutrient value across the study. So this ensures us the consistency for a discussion. Now we will be seeing about the biomarkers. Biomarkers are biochemical indicators found in biological samples. Biological samples to mean to say the blood, urine or hair. The biomarkers provide an objective measure of dietary intake or nutritional status. The category of biomarkers like recovery biomarkers, concentration biomarkers, replacement biomarkers and predictive biomarkers. If we do talk about the examples of recovery biomarkers, that is doubly labeled water or 24-hour urine nitrogen. For protein it is being taken, and the concentration biomarkers, that is serum vitamin C, plasma carotenoids or adipose tissue fatty acids. The replacement biomarkers, that is urinary phytoestrogens and alpha toxins. Predictive biomarkers are urinary fructose and sucrose. So if we see all these classification of biomarkers, this gives us from the intake to the concentration of nutrients or the compounds and the response dose relationship. These biomarkers makes us and give us a broader classification among themselves. What is the use of these biomarkers in nutritional assessment? Biomarkers provides concentrate, measurable data, reducing the reliance on subjective self-reported method, which is the reason that in the current time this has gained a more importance. Biomarkers reflect actual metabolic status and physiological effects offering into the nutrient function. It also helps in calibrate and correct the inaccuracies in dietary intake data, improving the precision of studies. Also, it validates and serves as a standard goal methods for us, and also for validating a new dietary assessment tools and research findings. There are few critical limitations of biomarkers, which has been enlisted from metabolic interface to high cost, short-term nature, and invasiveness, which makes it more to be think when you have to take ahead for the biomarkers as a nutrition assessment. So in summary to this chapter, I want to tell you that the diet exposure refers to the measurement of food consumed by the individual, and it's central to the understanding that the food, nutrients or dietary pattern, the diet and the disease relationship in epidemiological research, which has been seen as very important that the common dietary assessment methods that can be a 24-hour recalls or FFQs, which is very commonly being used, and diet histories, diet patterns or food records, each differ in accuracy, each differ in cost and also the feasibility to take ahead. But most of the time it has been seen that the dietary data often faces errors. The errors can be a recall bias, the error can be underreporting, and a change in the eating behavior during the recording, which can be an individual versus a systemic. So to ensure the reliability, validation using the biomarkers and standardization of tools and the procedure, it is very important and essential to go for validation. So in overall, the accurate dietary assessment is critical for informing a public health nutrition and policy decision. So with this, we come an end to this chapter. Here are a few important references that can be used for this study to take ahead. So we'll be meeting you for the next session. Thank you very much.